morning, everybody. Well, you guys always say you like really long videos. Here you go. Harry has been hit with two enormous developments at once. We have a major decision in his court battle, and while that's happening, Harry and Meghan are preparing to take their family back to Britain, but there's a lot more going on with this return than what the headlines are telling you. And yeah, I did a deep dive. You know how I am. And by the way, the Sussex squad is going straight up crazy. There's a lot. Let's get busy. We're going to start off this morning with Harry and the 6 other high-profile individuals. They were ordered to pay the interim £9.54 million or $13 million payment to Associated Newspaper, the publisher of the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday. Now, this is in the written, judgment from the High Court. The group must settle this initial payment towards the publisher's legal costs by 4 p.m. on August 28th, following their failed invasion of privacy lawsuit. The cost order follows the ruling last month by Judge Nicklin, who dismissed the group's lawsuit. Now, keep in mind, you've got Sir Elton John, David Furnish, Elizabeth Hurley, Sadie Frost, Sir Simon Hughes, and Baroness Doreen Lawrence. FYI, the judge also ruled that outstanding fees must be paid on an indemnity basis, and that means the claimants must contribute to the legal bill without the A&L having to prove every expense was strictly reasonable or proportionate. You guys should know that A&L's total defense expenses across the 4-year litigation topped £34 million. The $9.54 million is just an interim payment. The final amount that they're going to owe will be decided during subsequent detailed assessment hearings. For some of these claimants, their share could potentially be a very significant financial burden, especially if their insurance does not cover what they expected it to cover, because we have heard rumblings that the insurance is trying to get out of paying due to some clauses that they had in the contract. All right, let's move on now to our bigger story. My goodness, this story has changed dramatically in the last 24 hours. First, we were told that Harry, Meghan, and the kids were moving back to Britain with the children, that the children were enrolled in British schools, a place to live has been arranged, the king was informed, and Harry and Meghan are expected back in Britain for what was initially described as an extended period. So, of course, headlines immediately started calling this a reverse Megxit. But now we're getting clarification that apparently they aren't moving back permanently. Sources speaking to TMZ said this is an open-ended but temporary stay. And what does that mean? And the answer was Harry and Meghan are going to take it day by day. They're keeping the Montecito house. Their businesses are remaining in California. Doria is remaining in California. And Harry and Meghan are not returning as working royals. So this is not Megxit being undone. And the more I've gone through these stories, the more I've realized there are really just two questions. Why are they coming back? And how long has this been planned for? Now, there were signs. So let's start with something that didn't seem terribly significant when it happened, and that would be Joss Stone. Nearly a year ago, she returned to Britain after living in the U.S., and she spoke about a conversation she had with Harry. And according to the reports, Harry was interested in her decision to bring her family home and what the experience was like. So at the time, you could easily dismiss that as a conversation between two people who both lived abroad. But now it looks more interesting because that wasn't the only sign. We also now have reporting that Harry and Meghan conducted what was described as a secret reconnaissance in the Cotswolds ahead of this move. So there's been considerable speculation about where they're going to live, with the Cotswolds repeatedly appearing as a possibility. And if they were already looking at locations, that tells us this was not a decision somebody made over breakfast last Tuesday. And then, of course, we have the July visit, and I think we need to look at that visit again, knowing what we know today. Visit in July looks very different now because Meghan returned to Britain, Archie and Lily returned, the entire family was there together. They visited Althorpe, which is the Spencer family estate and the burial place of Princess Diana. And more importantly, they spent private time with King Charles and Queen Camilla at Highgrove. And it was supposedly, allegedly, the first time Charles had seen the kids in 4 years. And at the time, it was presented largely as a family reunion. But now, weeks later, we're being told the children are going to be attending school in Britain, and Harry and Meghan will be living there for an extended period of time. It certainly makes the trip more significant in hindsight, and now we add the next piece. The fact that the kids are enrolled in school shows that this is really more substantial than an extended holiday. They've been enrolled in British schools and schools starting. And that's, again, not something you organize overnight. You have to research, apply, determine where you're going to live, work out transportation and security, and make arrangements for the children's lives in California. And you have to coordinate all that with your work. So regardless of where Harry and Meghan now describe this as a temporary living situation, enrolling 2 children in British schools indicates a level of preparation. And there's another fascinating element, and it's the fact that the king didn't know until Sunday. So if all of these reports are accurate, there were already conversations about Britain, reconnaissance to the Cotswolds, a family visit in July, school arrangements, a UK residence, and yet Charles wasn't informed of their plans until days before the public announcement. So we don't know when each individual decision was made, and I don't think it's fair to say Harry deliberately concealed some fully formed plan from his dad, but it certainly doesn't look like Charles orchestrated this. And this brings me to something that's irritating me about all of this coverage. Stop blaming Charles. I've seen reporting quoting sources saying Charles is the reason they're returning and he's somehow responsible. I'm sorry, Harry's a grown man. He's 41 years old. He doesn't need his father's permission to move to Britain. And Charles doesn't have authority to tell his adult son, you can't come back to this country. Harry's British. If he wants to live in Britain, he can go home. If Meghan and the kids are legally able to reside there with him, that's their decision. Charles can determine what happens within the institution of the monarchy. The palace can say Harry's not a working royal. Charles can uphold Queen Elizabeth's decision that there's no half in, half out. Harry can't simply announce he's going to carry out engagements for the crown. These are different questions. This is all Harry's doing. And Buckingham Palace has reportedly made it very clear that their status isn't changing. They're private individuals. There's no new hybrid role. There's no half in, half out. All Charles has done has welcomed the opportunity to see more of his son and grandchildren privately as a father and grandfather. I mean, it's irritating me. Stop blaming a 77-year-old man for the decisions of his 40-something-year-old son. Now let's deal with another rumor, because I've seen this all over social media. People are saying the Montecito house has been sold. That is untrue. Property records we examined showed that June 18th, 2020 was the last transfer date. The house is not publicly listed for sale. It's an expensive property, but could it be marketed privately? Yes, it could be. But that's different from saying it's been sold. They purchased the property for $14.65 million. The original mortgage was about $9.52 million. And they're saying now that the mortgage now is about $8.1 to $8.3 million. Online estimates of the home's value are all over the place. And so I wouldn't put much weight on some of the enormous numbers you're seeing circulating online. And the property appears to have been purchased through a private trust connected with Meghan's longtime business partner, Andrew Meyer of Freeman Financial, rather than appearing on the deed under Harry and Meghan. So as of right now, it has not been sold. And these reports are saying they don't intend to sell it. Now, this is where the Daily Mail story becomes interesting, because the reporting are saying that Harry and Meghan intend to retain this estate, even though they have mounting costs while establishing another life in Britain. And that's worth discussing. We're not talking about a little 2-bedroom condo in California for occasional visits. This is an enormous Montecito estate. There's a mortgage, property taxes, insurance, security, landscaping, utilities, repairs, general maintenance, potential staffing. They're going to maintain a substantial residence in Britain. And they reportedly have the property in Portugal as, that they have to maintain as well. So I'm not going to tell you they can't afford it. We don't have access to their bank accounts. Nobody outside their financial circle knows precisely what their current wealth or cash flow looks like, but it is perfectly reasonable to ask whether maintaining expensive properties on multiple continents makes financial sense indefinitely, especially because the commercial environment surrounding Harry and Meghan today isn't identical to the one that they had in 2021. Back then, everybody wanted a piece of them. They're still earning money. Meghan has, as ever, Archwell Productions continues. Harry has projects of his own, but enormous houses have enormous carrying costs, whether you're sleeping in them or not. So I'm not going to say they have to sell it. We don't know. But if this is a temporary stay in Britain, it becomes possibly increasingly permanent later on. The financial logic of maintaining Montecito may have to be reconsidered, and keeping it right now tells us something important. They're leaving themselves an out. Now, it's because I don't think they're burning the boat yet. I don't think this is a reverse Megxit, because the California home remains. Archwell operations remain in California, as ever remains in California. Employees remain there. Doria remains there. Harry and Meghan can operate from Britain while maintaining their American infrastructure. So they're not closing the California chapter. They're just adding a British chapter back into it. And according to TMZ's reporting, even Harry and Meghan don't know how long this is going to last. 6 months, a year, maybe longer. And that makes the school's enrollment for the children even more interesting, because they're simultaneously putting down roots in Britain while deliberately refusing to pull up their roots in California. In a strange way, they might have created something unremarkably similar to the transatlantic life that they originally wanted. Not working royals, but privately, Britain and North America, which is quite an irony considering how this entire saga started. FYI, Maddie, keeping tuned on Twitter, found this. Apparently, they intend to rent out that house. And the house in Britain? Apparently, it's owned by a friend, probably Ellen DeGeneres, not sure, but they're not having to pay anything to stay there. Yep. I want you to remember January of 2020 when Harry and Meghan announced that they were going to step back as senior members of the royal family, become financially independent, and divide their time between Britain and North America. And what followed was Megxit. And then they settled in California. And in the years that followed, Harry described royal life in extraordinarily negative terms. He said he felt trapped. You had the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, Spare. Harry accused William of physically attacking him during an argument over Meghan. He wrote about Charles pleading with his sons, please don't make my final years a misery. And Harry and Meghan made serious allegations about the institution that they left. And Harry's relationship with William collapsed, which is why coming back to live in Britain simply isn't a geographical relocation. They're coming back into proximity with the very institution and family from which they spent 6 years publicly distancing themselves. And that's where this becomes complicated. And I want you to remember what Harry said after he left. During the Oprah show, Harry described himself as being trapped in the royal system. He then said that Charles and William were trapped also. He said, quote, my father and my brother, they are trapped. They don't get to leave. And at that time, Harry was presenting himself as the one who had escaped, the one who had found freedom in America. And 6 years later, Charles is king, William is the Prince of Wales, and Harry is the one going back. Now, Harry isn't returning as a working royal, and that's an important distinction, but there's an irony here. The two men Harry said were trapped stayed exactly where they were, and the man that escaped is coming home. William is a very different question from Charles. Charles may want to see his son and want a relationship with the grandchildren as their grandfather, and he's living with cancer. And again, I understand why in that position he might decide that whatever happens publicly, he wants some relationship with his child while he can have it. But William is not Harry's father. And there's been no indication that William has forgotten everything that's happened. And now we're seeing headline after headline describing William as angry, furious, apoplectic, and the prospect of Harry returning. And one said that Harry was smoldering. Another called Harry and Meghan's move a slap in the face and suggested it could create serious risks for the monarchy. And Kensington Palace palace has remained quiet. Reports say that William and Catherine were given prior warning about the Sussexes' return. And let me just say that words like furious, smoldering are coming from the reports and the commentators. We haven't yet heard William stand in front of a mic and say, I'm angry. So I'm not going to present anonymous descriptions, but we do know that the brothers, remain estranged. Harry publicly disclosed deep personal details on William. We know there's no meeting between Harry and William during the Sussexes' July visit, and no public evidence that William has agreed to reconciliation, and that's enough. We don't need to embellish it. I do think it's important you guys know that William and Catherine arrived at Balmoral with the children. Reports simply say they're not delighted about Harry and Meghan's return. They're upset about the years of accusations from the Sussex camp, but they are staring straight forward, and William is saying there is no way back for Harry, and he will not be meeting with him. Then came another interesting story saying that Harry was willing to be the bigger person in his feud with William. And that wording caught my attention, let me tell you, because reconciliation isn't something you declare yourself morally superior of offering. If Harry genuinely wanted to reconcile with William, wonderful. I hope they do. They're brothers. But William is allowed to decide whether he's ready. You got to have two people. Harry moving closer to William does not create an obligation for William to resume a relationship with him. Charles can't force it, and neither can the public, the palace, or Harry. And that's why some of these headlines suggesting that William could be pushed into a reconciliation are getting ahead of themselves. You can put two brothers in the same country, but you can't make them trust each other. A lot of royal commentators are warning that this return could create problems for the palace, and those are opinions, not evidence of some secret Sussex strategy. But I understand why the questions are being asked. There's another side of this that hasn't received too much attention, and that's what does Britain do for Meghan's brand? We've already seen speculation about whether As Ever could expand into the UK, and one PR expert was joking about the possibility of a Cotswold photo shoot with Meghan carrying a basket, in a linen apron, blah, blah, blah. The English countryside, try to picture it, gardens, preserves, flowers, lifestyle content. And ironically, the country she left could potentially become extremely useful to the lifestyle brand she's building. The newest report says As Ever operations will remain in California. So again, we're looking at this hybrid existence. British family life, California business infrastructure. But whether British consumers embrace it is another question entirely, because polling suggests that Harry and Meghan are not exactly returning to a country begging for their comeback. YouGov surveyed more than 5,000 people, and according to the results, 21% said Harry and Meghan should move back to Britain, 33% said they should not, and 45% said they weren't sure. Among people 65 and older, 47% said no, don't come back. Meghan was only viewed positively by 22% and negatively by 65%. Harry stands at 33% positive and 58% negative. So Harry and Meghan are returning to a Britain that has changed its opinion of them considerably since their wedding, and they're going to have to navigate that. Let me tell you, reaction in the United States has not been sentimental. Some of the reaction has been brutal. The New York Post put the story on its front page with "thrown back," and above it, "Our long national nightmare is over." And then the line, "Harry and Meghan returning to UK after failure to take the colonies." Now that's savage. Then the Los Angeles Times went with "Goodbye Montecito." CBS described the move as a stunning turnabout, as one correspondent said Harry may have felt like a fish out of water in America. Then Meghan McCain entered the conversation. She called them D-list royals, entitled grifters, saying Americans could see right through them and wishing Britain good luck because they were now Britain's problem. Now that's Meghan McCain's opinion, but she's not alone in the broader American media reaction. And that's really fascinating because 6 years ago, America was representing freedom and opportunity. By some of these headlines, parts of the American media are not exactly heartbroken to see Harry and Meghan go. Know who else had something to say? Jenna Bush Hager. She called out Harry and Meghan during a live segment on the Today Show following the breaking reports. She took issue with the chaotic nature of their exit and sudden re-entry, critiquing them for lighting a match on their royal lives in 2020, only to reverse course. Underneath all of these snarky headlines is a very legitimate question. Harry and Meghan arrived in the United States with every conceivable advantage: global fame, enormous public interest, extraordinary commercial opportunities. Well, Spotify is gone. Their Hollywood ambitions haven't produced the media empire that many expected. Meghan is now building as ever. Harry has Invictus and his charitable work. And they're certainly not abandoning America entirely. But 6 years ago, America was supposed to represent their future away from the monarchy. And now, where are they? Back in the UK, building a life in Britain again. Now, you can call that temporary. You can call that an extended stay. You can call it whatever you want. But it's very difficult to call the last 6 years the American success story that everybody expected. I firmly believe that their return to Britain is an admission of failure. Think about what Harry and Meghan said they were leaving Britain to find. And then when they arrived in America, they had all those opportunities that most people could only dream of. Hollywood was literally knocking on their door. And 6 years later, everything is gone. The media empire people expected never materialized. And, does that mean they have nothing in America? Of course not. As we've said before, but if the great America experiment had turned out the way Harry and Meghan hoped, they wouldn't have been going back. And that's why I think the phrase admission of failure has struck such a nerve. They didn't have to say it. The move says quite a bit all on its own. And now, the pied resistance for everybody. The Sussex squad is having an absolute freaking meltdown. But I wanted to show you some of the stuff that they were putting up online. Here you go. Meghan may call this temporary. They may keep Montecito and their businesses in California and insist this is not a return to royal life. But 6 years ago, they left Britain determined to prove they could build something bigger and better on their own. And now, after all the details, the deals, the interviews, the accusations, and the promises of a new life in America, they're heading back to the very country they walked away from. The one that Harry said his father and brother were trapped in. So, Charles stayed, William stayed, and now Harry's coming back. Now, whether you want to call that an admission of failure, a change of priorities, or simply Harry realizing that home is home, I'll leave that for you guys to decide. But one thing is for certain for me, this story has come full circle in a way I don't think even Harry and Meghan expected. So let me know what you think, in your comments. Put them down, make them good. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button and the bell for all notifications. Then go down into the description box where you'll find the link to my Twitter, my Gettr, my Rumble, my email, a link to my father's book, which remains up for sale on Amazon, a link to my Amazon wish list, as well as a physical address. For those of you who have donated to my coffee fund, thank you so much. And as always, you guys, have a great day.